And I started to have this question about what STEAM is. I guess about my 4th or 5th year into implementation in the school I was in. And we didn't really have a cohesive definition or idea what that was. We knew best practices. We knew what worked for our students, for our community. But when I started to present at conferences or go share my ideas with colleagues in the arts field or in other educational fields, it was kind of hard to talk about because we didn't have this kind of cohesive definition or a shared understanding. And so I started to look at that. So I think everyone's on now. I'm going to share my screen. Can y'all see that video? Can y'all see what is STEAM? Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, just want to make sure because I am not versed well in Teams, but I have taught myself and it's been going well. So just what is STEAM, right? So before we implement anything in our classroom, in our school, with our colleagues, we need to know exactly just what STEAM is, or STEM. And I'm going to speak from a STEAM perspective, but it incorporates STEM as well. So I started asking myself this question when I was ordering these Procyon dyes online. And I was working with 2 collaborators where I taught, a math teacher and a science teacher. And they were interested in closing some academic gaps concerning both measurement and states of matter, which are both elementary standards, as I'm sure y'all are aware. And we also, my interest was getting the children to look at textile artists, which is a kind of an art form that is not, well versed in the elementary setting, as it should be in my opinion. So we were looking at this. We also had a quilter on site on campus, and she was helping us with how to measure, to quilt, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm ordering these Procyon dyes online, and I got in touch with my friend who's a chemist, and she's like, oh, you've got to have all these safety measures in place because they can be toxic if they're inhaled. And I actually ordered N95 masks. And this is way before the pandemic, a couple of years before a year before the pandemic. And so I actually had those on hand that we had used when we started implementing this. And so I was like, this is so odd that I'm doing this and I'm ordering these dyes and I'm collaborating with these people in this way. And if we do a lot of unusual things on campus. And so here's some images of some of the unusual or odd things that we were implementing. We were definitely shifting our instructional practices to be more hands-on, to be more collaborative, to be more socially constructed. And not only are the children doing, as you can see here in this lower picture, the students actually figured out how they could pull those chairs up. They were doing a weaving exercise, and we were actually doing some math integration here. But they're working together, they're collaborating, making sure it's correct. But we also have the staff and faculty collaborating together. And this is during a workshop with arts integration specialists. And so we had to learn in a different way. We had to learn in ways that were uncomfortable, just like it was uncomfortable for me to order these dyes. I mean, I literally was concerned that I was not going to be able to use these correctly or safely in my classroom. Of course, I did with collective efficacy with my chemist and my science teacher. But we are always doing things that are kind of outside of our comfort level with STEAM, but we still don't really know how to define that. Here we're using different tools, we're using different art processes. I was, my undergraduate studies never talked about students getting messy. You can see this child's got paint on the forehead. It was more about producing beautiful art for the parents. And teaching kids about art history and art criticism along the way. Our school, where I taught before, is definitely a rural location, so we have some gardens already implemented on campus, but the gardening completely took off because it was a way for us to implement STEAM effectively that our students understood, and also for our community partners to be effective in. So here's some teachers trying to figure out what's the best way to attack or to change this garden situation here. So everyone, and they're not gardeners. So everyone's learning outside of their comfort zone. We still didn't have kind of a focus on just what STEAM was. We knew it was beautiful, we knew it was complex, we knew it was creative. And that's why I love this image here, this book with this beautiful creation of the words together, this form. But despite a national focus on STEAM education, and there's a national focus. Now, STEM came into focus around 1957 when Sputnik was launched. If y'all didn't know that, a lot of people attribute STEM education's birth to that because we got beat in the space race, right? And so we were not as dominant globally as we thought we were. So we've got to ramp up our students' educational proficiencies, mainly in science and math, and then engineering and technology came later. And then the arts were added later, not necessarily until the last decade or so. But despite this national focus, and there's a lot of national resources, there's a lot of political support for STEM and STEAM, K through 12 setting, as y'all are aware. That's why we're all here today. It's not going anywhere, and it's legitimate, and it's significant. But a certain uncertainty surrounding what STEM and STEAM actually looks like in practice exists. And this is a challenge. It's a challenge for people that want to implement this effectively and to really get their kids to be successful in STEM and STEAM. So the first challenge is to navigate through the different definitions. And these are all pulled from peer-reviewed articles. This is all research-based. So the first definition we look at here for STEM is a means to teach science and mathematics integrated with technology and engineering within the K through 12 setting. Now that goes back to Sputnik. We have to be proficient in math and science to stay globally competitive. We cannot let the global world, be dominant, and we had been dominant before that. They also describe STEM as an interdisciplinary approach utilizing one or more of the STEM disciplines while teaching one or more other school subject areas, such as social studies, ELA. That's significantly different from the first one, if you think about it. First is let's be proficient in science and math and work in technology and engineering. The second one is let's go ahead and teach our regular disciplines of ELA, science, social studies, the ones that don't involve science, technology, engineering, and math, and just weave those in. The third definition is STEM is a dynamic process in flux that evolves over time. Well, we all probably could agree with that if you have been involved in implementing STEM or STEAM. It does change, it evolves. It's specific to the site. It's specific to the students you're teaching. STEM is also the application of the STEM disciplines to find solutions for real world problems. And that's a new definition. That's more of like, let's figure out how we can really give this to the kids and then get them to be able to apply it in a real world setting. Now then here come the arts. How are we going to move the arts into this? And art proponents say that, an instructional approach to education in which students demonstrate creative or innovative approaches and experiential inquiry-based learning within the STEM disciplines. So if they are hands-on learning experiences where it's driven by inquiry, if they're looking at a certain phenomenon or they've got a problem to solve, they've got to be able to have that creative, innovative approach to be able to solve that successfully. That's one definition. Another definition is the arts actually improve motivation and engagement, and that's what this next definition talks about. Utilization of the arts for increased transdisciplinary integrative approaches where the arts act as the vehicle for meaningful and personal connections compared to the multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach for STEM, which is typical of STEM. Now, multidisciplinary just means using one or two, more than two, at least two, disciplines separately to solve a common problem or to look at a common phenomenon. Interdisciplinary means, using different disciplines together in conjunction to look at a common problem. Transdisciplinary, of course, this is just a quick definition. There's a lot to unpack those different forms of integration. Means using them in conjunction in a synergistic way where you can't even tell the differences of the disciplines you're using and you're solving a problem or looking at a phenomenon that the kids care about. There's a personal involvement or connection. And a lot of times transdisciplinary integration starts with empathy or intent. And so that's the big difference. So after looking at all those different definitions, I decided I was going to ask some teachers that implement STEAM education on their school on a regular basis. These are teachers that are at another STEAM certified school in the state of Georgia. This is not the school that I was in. I did not know any of these participants. And I asked 7. Of course, these are pseudonyms. They've all been de-identified, so there's nobody you necessarily know. But they all, as you can see quickly, are in the elementary school system. They all have significant amount of years in elementary education. We don't have any new teachers here. And they have some, at least 3 years of, experience in STEM education, and they are highly educated. Only one, all of them or at least have their master's and 2 have their specialists. So I asked them, what is STEAM? First of all, I want you to draw me a map. Tell me a map. Teachers are good at mapping. Y'all know that. You all know how to draw a map. We have been, I'm sure, PD'd to death about how to draw different kind of maps. So they were able to do a personal meaning map, which is actually backed up by research, and it just tell me anything that comes to mind about STEAM. And these are some of the aspects or concepts that they listed. This is just one example. If you're looking at this, I'm sure you recognize several of these terms, these aspects, these concepts, things that belong to STEAM education. I'm sure you've seen this kind of mapping as well. It was interesting. Every participant did a very different personal meaning map. Then they also sent me a picture. What's a picture that conceptualizes STEAM for you? What does it look like in your classroom setting? If you had to send me a picture that said, this is STEAM, or pull it up on a piece of paper, on your phone to show, whoever you're hanging out with is not an educator, that has never even heard of STEAM, maybe at a family function. Hey, I understand you're really big in STEAM or STEM. What did it look like? This is what they'd send you. This is what they would show. And so you can see students here, they're collecting some data. They wanted to build a cooling station on their playground. It's, again, in a rural area. They have a lot of land, and they have a lot of heat, as we do in Georgia. So these kids are hot a lot, and they wanted a cooling section. Well, they said, okay, the school might do that, but you're going to have to present it to the superintendent. First of all, why we need it. So start gathering some data, how hot it is, where you want it, and what's going to be the best place for it, and what options you want in that cooling station. So they're beginning that process. We also see kids that are in 2nd grade that have actually had a part in designing and constructing their own chicken coop. These 2 boys are involved in gathering the eggs that day, collecting data, and they will see the life cycle in real time in their classroom setting where they incubate those eggs and watch them hatch. And then we see some students presenting their new knowledge. These are kindergarten students presenting their new knowledge of time and seasons and times of day in an artistic way that they've created to a set of peers. What I thought was interesting is not one picture that I was sent had any teacher involved. There's no teacher present. There's nobody there other than kids. Then I asked them some questions. So we got together and I said, explain to me your picture, explain to me your map. And they did, and all the aspects and all the concepts that they had in those pictures and in that map. And also said, like I told before, like I was talking before, if someone who was unfamiliar with STEAM education asked you to explain what it was, what would you say? And from those conversations and all that data, which was a lot, I whittled it down to 21 specific, meaningful concepts that were identified. And if you look at these are the things that you're going to hear in every other, talk that you're going to hear on this platform, probably this conference and other conferences that you go to, and they're all legitimate and they all make sense. And these are the things we talk about, we read about in the literature. And they inform what we do, but is that a definition? Is that a shared understanding of what we think STEAM is? And until we have a shared understanding, or what people like to call intersubjective knowledge, which is knowledge that we can agree upon together of what STEM or STEAM is, how can we can't implement that effectively until we understand that. So I took these concepts and I arranged them into to form 5 distinct categories of what these participants thought STEAM was. I think you'll agree with them. They believe that STEAM is student-centered and teacher-facilitated. If the student is not in the middle of what you're doing and their interest and their vibe and everything that you want to do in your classroom is not student-centered, then it's not going to be successful. Also, this is hard. This is a big shift in instructional practices that we'll talk about later. We're used to be sage on the stage. We're used to being the expert that, that delivers the content.
And so Monday is Medical Monday, dress in scrubs.
I like that.
Okay. Tuesday is Host a Trivia Tuesday.
Can y'all hear me now? Okay. What did y'all hear me talk about this at all? Okay. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the next category was inquiry-based learning. So inquiry-based learning is exactly what you know it is. I mean, it's your PBLs, it's your CER, it's your, and for the, I'm in this new district now, and everyone has all these acronyms that no one unpacks for me. It's so aggravating. So let me do that for y'all. So in case you don't know, CER is claim evidence reasoning, and PBL is project-based learning. And y'all probably know all the other ones, but if it's not an inquiry type of learning, experiential, hands-on, the kids don't get their hands dirty, they're not in it, then it's not necessarily STEAM to these participants at this school. They also said that it's non-traditional and unique. And like we talked earlier about, like we're ordering these really weird, unusual items to implement STEM or STEAM in our classroom settings. You know, it's odd. It makes us expand. It makes us want to be better and different. And we have to, tailor fit that to our students and what we're learning, what phenomenon we're studying, or what problem we're trying to solve. And so everyone agreed that it's very non-traditional, which can be difficult for a lot of teachers, especially if you taught a specific way to the standards every time. Now, it was interesting because most of the participants were very specific that they were not teaching different standards. We were still meeting our standards. We were still identifying the learning goals we needed to achieve, and we're still seeing those achievement gaps that we needed to focus on. It was getting to those in a different way, in a non-traditional or unique or tailor-made manner. Now, they also talked a lot about collaborative efforts, and that's not just in their own classroom setting. They really talked about a lot of teamwork with them and their students. They also talked about their co-teachers, their STEAM team at school, the collaboration we're having just right here today. They also talked about their collaboration with community partners and other stakeholders, parents that were coming in. If you don't have those collaborative efforts going strong, whether that's the small groups in your classroom, the conversations you ever have at lunch over the teachers, lunch room discussion, or the text message you have at home, hey, I'm really having a hard time teaching fractions. In my experience, do you have an artist that we can look at that really use fractions in their artwork? Then, it's not going to be successful. So they all talked about the collaborative efforts. They also talked about your integration needs to be strategic. Now, your integration needs to be strategic so that you can be effective. A lot of them talked about art integration. They did not like it because they were not familiar with the art standards. They were not trained musicians, they were not trained artists, but they knew that if they didn't implement the arts and the same rigor that they held the other disciplines, because the arts is the newcomer to the party, let's be honest, then it wasn't as, the kids didn't buy in as much. And when they did do that, with the help of their art educator or just looking up things online, that the kids dug it more. I mean, they were more involved. So they also have to have strategic integration as far as real world application. You couldn't integrate disciplines that the kids didn't care about. If you were going to be talking about, pollination or a certain ecosystem, you didn't want to talk about ecosystem that the kids didn't have firsthand experience in. So that was important for you to strategically integrate. Oh, also, that also comes to with like where your achievement gaps. What do you need to be focused on? I remember one of my dearest friends is a math teacher, and she's like, I didn't understand fractions until I cooked or made cakes at a bakery. And that's how she teaches her students now. So it's those strategic ways to integrate the different disciplines. So she did the science of all the different ingredients coming together and the rising of and all the different science things that go on with that, along with the math of the fractions. And then they had the design component on top of that because they had to design their own cakes. And so that's what made that STEAM lesson effective. But she had to be strategic about that. Now, all of these strategies, all of these categories combined to form their collective certainties of what they thought STEAM was. Now, this is specific to this case study. Okay, this is on their campus. Now, I do think it can inform everyone that's involved in STEM and STEAM. But this is what they thought that STEAM, this is their collective truth. This is their story they're telling from in these findings. So they said, certainty is a shift in instructional practices. One of them said, it's a real shift in mindset. You know, as so often as teachers, we stand up and give the information. Now what we do is assist in formulating an idea and providing the necessary materials to assist. That way you're not really formulating student ideas on your end. Oh gosh, that was hard for me because I remember I wanted students to do what I thought they needed to do to be successful in my art classroom, you know, before I even started the project. And a lot of that was based on I wanted to create good looking art that I could put in the hall the parents were proud of. That is not the way they said that STEM or STEAM is implemented. And one of the participants said, I actually think some people that have been teaching longer have a much harder time with it because they're used to being the sage on the stage. Well, that's a lot. It's a lot to take in to change the way that you're teaching and have taught, and it's been successful for you for years. I remember these two girls came to me, the one with braids. She said, I really have this great idea that I want to show as far as like organic shapes and geometric shapes, and I wanted this mural and I want it to be big. And I was like, wow. Well, first of all, I usually try to get everybody on the same page and, you know, as far as like doing pieces of art, but okay, you can do this on your own. And she started collaborating and pulling in different, participants. And so they came every morning for like 3 months and worked on this. And she probably had about 15 other artists work with her. And they did all these prototypes in their STEAM journals, and they talked about the mural they were creating, and they had all these stories, and they had all this ELA work that they brought in from the literature they were reading in their classroom, and they had all these titles, and all of this. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but it made sense to them. And then this is the picture of her trying to explain it to the administrator. She has all her prototypes laid out. She's explaining to them why she created this piece of art, and it was phenomenal, and it was impactful, not only to her, to him. And that's a very different thing for him to come into a classroom, speak to one student who has led an art project that's a collective art project and has presented it in a way where she is in charge of her own learning. I didn't say a word. And that can be very difficult for a lot of teachers. The other certainty that they talked about is it's beneficial for student advancement. We're training our students to be able to think for themselves, to problem solve, and to apply those problems to real world applications. So these are students that are sitting around a brand new garden bed that was erected in our school grounds, and we needed to have soil, and so we were figuring out where we were going to get the soil. So I went to the administrator and I said, hey, look, we need this much soil. He said, how much? I said, I don't know, I'm not a gardener. So he said, well, figure out how much. How do you do that? Well, I don't know. So I called my friend at the local university who worked for the Math Collaborative. So she brought the kids out and she started talking about cubic feet. Well, I was way out of my range of intelligence. I mean, I don't know how to do cubic feet, but she was telling the kids, and these are 4th grade students, about how to figure out how many cubic feet this garden would need. And so she talked to them a little while, and they were sitting around, and then I heard this conversation. So I'd like for you to hear, if I can get it to play, these two boys discussing how much volume they need to fill the garden bed up with. So he was able to take that knowledge that he already had and apply it to what they were getting ready to do. And then they went in there and pitched to the administrator how much cubic feet of dirt they needed, and it was delivered pretty quickly. So one of the participants said, I think STEAM is a good thing because kids have to learn to figure out how to figure it out rather than being told what to do. They need to figure out how to be that problem solver. It's student-led, and I really believe that is what's best for our kids. That doesn't mean it's always easiest for teachers, but that's not what our job is meant to be anyway. So that was another certainty that they decided. Again, they decided that it's definitely socially constructed. You're not going to create STEAM or STEM education in your class, in your school, or wherever you're trying to implement it in a vacuum. You've got to build it together, and it's going to be specific and role reliant. So your conceptualization of STEAM is you're going to bring all your own experiences, all your own knowledge, all your own professional development, all your own expertise to how you construct STEM or STEAM in your school. And you're going to do that alongside with your peers, your colleagues. You're going to do that alongside with your students and your administrators, your community partners. Where you implement STEAM is going to be specific to your environment, your climate. We were an agricultural, it was a farming community, so our partners in education and community came in from a farming base. We had a lot of live animals. We had a lot of farming. We had a lot of people talking about pollinators. I've also gone to schools that are in the tech center of Atlanta. So they had a lot of more coding, a lot more technological advances. I've also visited schools that were big into the automotive area. They were building cars and building different engineering processes that could serve those type of communities or industries. So it's going to be specific and socially constructive. And that collaboration piece is key. And it's not only for teachers, but for the students as well. We have to cooperate with one another. We've got to communicate and be bouncing ideas off each other frequently. And then I thought this was interesting too, that when the teacher said this, because it's not only a STEAM-based skill, but it's a soft skill. We all know that our students need to build their soft skills more effectively, right? So STEAM, especially after the pandemic, our social, emotional, soft skills are really going to have taken a hit. So we're going to have to really pony up and help them with that. And I think STEAM can do that, and she does too. She said STEAM promotes the idea that you're going to work with different people, that you may not think the same way they think, but you still have to work together. And I think STEAM definitely helps with that. And that's not only true for the kids, but it's true for the people that you're working together, your colleagues. I remember one day, I don't know if y'all have heard of Dot Day, but we were having Dot Day at our school, and we were implementing that, and I had a fuss with one of my best friends there. She said it's not a dot, it's a decimal. Well, she's math-based, and I'm art-based. And I said it's a mark, it's a dot, it's the beginning of a line. She said it's a decimal, so we ended up calling it all different things on campus. But the point is, you got to work together. You got to see it from different people's perspectives, and you have to be willing to expand and open your mind so that these kids can get it filtered from a lot of different ways. And then the last thing that they said that was most important is that transdisciplinary integration was crucial. The kids are not bought in. If they don't care about the learning that they're doing, if they don't care about the phenomenon they're studying or the problem they're trying to solve, they are not going to be intrinsically motivated. They are not going to be bought in. So, and that's what I always, at the end of the interviews, I said, what makes the most sense to you about STEAM? And she said, what makes the most sense to me is that STEAM is something that keeps the students engaged. You hear educators talking all the time about how they can't keep their attention. But STEAM always does if you implement it in a transdisciplinary manner or way. The kids have to be personally interested in the problem they're solving or the phenomenon they're studying. In this way, STEAM always keeps them engaged and allows them to choose the way they want to show their knowledge. I was like, wow, and that's true. So just a minute of Lucy. We erected outside the art studio a vertical garden, because though we had all this space to put in horizontal gardens in on our campus, and our kids were having a hard time just figuring out horizontal and perpendicular and parallel lines, and even though they have all this experience on the computer, they don't even know what orientation means. So anyway, so we're working on that, And so we talked about vertical gardens are useful in most of the, around the world, especially we looked at India and other countries, because they don't have a lot of green space. And so they are erecting these green vertical gardens, these green spaces vertically. And so, but how are we going to feed that garden? And we talked about pollinators. And so we installed an aquaponics or a faux aquaponics system. So here's Lucy, and we've built this probably 3 or 4 months now on campus, and she's kind of explaining what our vertical garden is about. So Lucy is talking about our water system, which is the aquaponics. Of course, they get a big kick out of the fertilizer being the fish waste. So you can see, how they got bought into that. And for her knowledge base, for her to be able to speak of it, and that's a student filming her. So they literally asked if they could take the iPad and go outside and film that out in the hall. And I said, sure. And they brought that back, that gym. I was like, wow, they really get it. And so we built that over the whole year and incorporated a lot of stuff. So if you look at this graph, here we go, this visual that I created. So these are your categories. We had all those concepts that were really important in STEAM education for those teachers listening. These are your categories that kind of feed into all of these collective acknowledgments of what STEAM is to these people. Okay, to these teachers at this school. It's just a case study. So I believe a lot of them are transferable, but it created for them anyway, intersubjective knowledge or knowledge that they could agree on. They agreed it involved shift of instructional practices. They agreed that it was beneficial for student advancement in the 21st century landscape. They agreed that it had to be transdisciplinary for the kids to buy in. And they believed that it was socially constructed. Those were the certainties that they discussed. Now, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother to try to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, and then use that, then use what they can lead to. That tool they can lead to new ways of thinking. Okay, this is intersubjective knowledge that we can use as a tool for our own implementation of STEAM. So, what can we do with this intersubjective knowledge? What can we do with what they found? Perhaps we can identify and implement STEAM-related teaching practices that help booster both teaching and collective efficacy concerning the certainties of STEAM. We have to be proficient in teaching it, and we have to know together how to teach it well. We need to foster professional development and training in specific categories of STEAM that help educators shift their instructional practices effectively. I know I'm biased, but I believe that art integration strategies are key for that, okay? They get us out of our box, they get us out of our comfort zone. They help us to shift those instructional practices and learn how to fail forward and to laugh at ourselves. And if we can laugh at ourselves, our students can laugh at themselves. We need to promote training on how to specifically integrate STEAM disciplines through a transdisciplinary approach. If your kids do not give a darn about what you're doing or studying or looking at or trying to solve a problem about, they're not bought in. Especially now after the pandemic, I've seen a great deal of students' lack of just apathy right now. They need to be cared for. Their social emotional well-being is just going to be in the front and center, and I think STEAM is ideal to fix that. It is what we need to reach them with. So I think that's really important. We need to support STEAM educators, professional learning communities by allotting common planning time and plenty of opportunities for collaboration so STEAM is socially constructed or instructed. We have to recognize we don't build this alone. This is a team, this is a family that builds this together. And we need to embolden our educators and other stakeholders to advocate for STEAM education as a distinctly different approach to instruction. So it's going to be a change, it might be hard, but it's considered beneficial for student success and advancement in the 21st century landscape. So that is my spiel and what I wanted to share with you today, just what STEAM means to me, or what STEAM is, according to these people here at that STEAM certified school. Yours is going to look perhaps differently. But I think we need to start talking about that. We need to come to a shared understanding so we can create a co-vision or a vision that we can implement for our students. Now, does anybody have any questions? Anybody have anything